Great. So, hey, everyone, good afternoon, good morning, or good lunchtime, I guess, depending on your time zone. We're going to go through the Inventor user group today. And before we get started, my name's Caleb Funk. I'm one of the solutions team managers with IMAGINiT. And I've been with IMAGINiT for about 20 years now. So if you've heard one of these WebExes before, there's a good chance you've probably heard my voice or seen my face, and I've been the one running the controls. Today, though, we've got a different presenter, Randy Andracki. And Randy, I'll have you introduce yourself a little bit.
All right, great. Thank you, Caleb. Hi, everybody, and again, welcome to our user group. I am Randy Andracki, and just a little bit of background about myself. I've over 25 years working in the manufacturing and CAD industry. Most of the times I've spent working with Autodesk resellers. Specifically, I've been with IMAGINiT for just over 7 months now. I've been using the Autodesk products since the 90s, AutoCAD, Inventor since version 1, so since it first came out. And for the past several years, I've also been working with the Vault products. So it's a little background on myself there. Anything else you'd like to add before we get started, Caleb?
No, we were talking a little bit. So my understanding is today you're going to take us through some of the browser tools that we have available, and then a lot of the tools that we have in the productivity tools for assemblies and things like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, kind of broke it down. We'll cover a few. We'll talk about a few features that we're gonna via PowerPoint. Then we'll get into a presentation, and then we'll do the same thing. So we'll toggle back and forth just a little bit, so that we don't bore everybody with just PowerPoint. This is the user group, and we like to be able to show you and teach you. Hopefully, we'll be teaching you some new capabilities here today that you may not have been aware of, may have been in front of your nose for all you know for quite a while, and just didn't make the picks to be able to see them. So, I guess without further ado, I'll get started, Caleb.
Sounds good to me.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks. Again, welcome everybody. So let's start out with just one of our first. Yeah, let's get our system live here. It's been sitting idle for a little bit. There we go. All right, so we have a couple of things that, as Caleb mentioned, we're prepared to show you today. So what I thought I'd kick things off with a quick review of the first set of topics here. Our focus for the day will be in two areas of Inventor, the browser, and we'll be working in showing you several of the productivity tools from the productivity panel. In the browser, we're going to show you how you can search for parts, assemblies, and we're also going to show you some organization techniques and how to display extended data for features and constraints, and allowing you to make better and more informed decisions while you're working with your designs. Then what we're going to do is we're going to move in. From there, we're going to move on to some productivity tools, and those tools are located in the productivity panel of the assembly tab. So these tools essentially are streamlined workflows that will help increase your productivity. They combine multiple commands into one. It could be 2 commands into one, 3 or 4 or 5 commands into one. And a couple of them we'll get into. You'll see and you'll get a good appreciation for the power of them as we move along here. So where we're going to start out talking from the browser, and we're going to start talking about searching and how the browser actually does provide a means for you to search for parts, assemblies, constraints even. You ever wonder where that one part was? I know I have. That's somewhere in that long tree of that's in the browser, and you just couldn't find it. So you're picking on the plus sign, opening up all those sub-assemblies to try and find it, when all you need to do is use the search commands. We're going to show you how to search for items within your browser, and this will be our quick search. We're also going to take you into a little more advanced searching where you can define more specific criteria, and we'll get into the details of that as well. After some searching, we'll show you how we can start building some organization into the browser. especially as your assemblies, your sub-assemblies start to get bigger, the browser starts to get busier, and it becomes tougher to navigate through it. So we're going to show you how we can build some structure, some organization using folders. And you actually see a couple of folders here in the PowerPoint that I have on the screen. And I've given some logical names, so I bet you can all guess what's inside of this one and what's inside of this one. So these are just techniques which I found were real helpful when I'm working on 3,000-4,000 part automated machines that I used to work on. After we've built some structure, some organization into our browser, we're also going to step into a couple of the first set of productivity tools. We're going to talk about renaming browser nodes and alpha sort. Renaming browser nodes, essentially what this command does is it identifies all the component nodes in the assembly browser and provides three schemes for naming them. Default, that's by default what we always see, but we can also, if have a part number or the file name appear. Now, if part number is not defined in an iProperty, because part number is an iProperty, so if that field is blank in your parts, you will not have any part number information to be displayed. So that will just default to file name and default. But as Vault users, if we're Vault users, we are starting to fill that information in though. Now this command also is a good fix for assemblies that have been renamed in the browser, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Another thing we're going to get into is the sorting of commands. I'm sorry, not of commands, but of the data that's within your browser. So let's actually step into and move on to the next section then. So after we've gone through some of that, final slide here before we get into the first part of our presentation, we'll show you how we can actually show some additional extended information in the browser. So organizing the browser, searching the browser, and how to add more information so we can take more advantage of the browser. We've all seen when we're in the assembly panel of our model tab, we know we have access to our parts and our assemblies, and that's where we see our assembly constraints. Well, you notice in this slide here, I've got some information showing the name of the part. If I made that slide a little bit wider, I'd see both parts that are associated to this constraint. So we can add extended data to our assembly browser, assembly panel. At the same time, if I move over to this side, and we're working in the modeling panel, I can display extended information about the part features. It's in the modeling tab, as you're aware. It's where we display all the fillets, the holes. I mean, how many times have you see hole 1, 2, 3? You have a plate that's got 300 holes. It sure would be nice if I could know which group of holes are the 832s, are they maybe the M5s or M6 holes by whatever their definition is. Being able to display extended information within the browser will be a big help for you. And all of that's available from the applications options that's underneath the Tools tab. So let's move into the first part of our presentation and show you some of that. So let me just tab over here. So I have hopefully everybody's seen the Inventor. I'll wait a moment here so that all our screens have a chance to refresh. So to get started with, here's a little search button or magnifying glass which I wanted to talk about. And with searching, again, as I mentioned, as our assemblies get larger, more parts, more sub-assemblies, and more constraints, the browser just becomes more difficult to navigate in terms of locating specific data. Especially if the assembly was created by somebody else, you already feel like you're in territory that you're just not real familiar with. So some of these tools that I'm going to talk about here will help get you comfortable interfacing with the other assemblies built by others. So let's get into our first command here, and it's just a search, and it opens up this little window. And I want to type in, I want to find my trowel. So if I just type the characters TR, immediately the browser starts to focus on parts where TR appears. Doesn't matter where along the file name or along the part number the characters appear, as long as it sees that sequence of characters. O, W, if I put the EL, I see there are my trowels. Specifically, let's spell it out now. And I see that I have the trowel arm, in this particular case, in these two assemblies. So very easy and quick to just be able to search on specific, for specific characters, finding parts, finding assemblies. Even if I type the word MATE. Now, a little tough to be able to see in this case because there's so many make constraints, but maybe I get a little more specific and I want to find all my 1024 fasteners. Let's widen our browser tree a little bit, and we start to see all the 1024 fasteners here. Maybe I want to find all the quarter-inch fasteners that I have in there. Again, allowing me to be able to search and focus the browser towards the specific set of information that I need. Another search tool, and we'll close this off here just by picking the X. Another search tool is underneath our little 3 bars here under the Advanced Settings menu, labeled Find. Brings up a dialog box, and in the dialog gives us more options, more capability than what we saw with just the basic quick search that we saw earlier. I can search on components. I can search on relationships. I can features, sketches, welds. And if I select components, for example, I have additional extended information which I could define to help, or that I can define to help refine my search and start to hone in on what I'm looking for. Property information, who is the editor, who's the engineer. iProperty information is what we're talking about here. Say I want to look for a comment that begins with something, or maybe it ends, or it just includes. And I want to include, in this case, support. I want to find all the supports, and let's add that to my list. Now I can save this, by the way, so if this is a search that I do frequently, I can save it, and then I can open that search up at a later time. If I get out of Inventor, into Inventor, another day, another week, different file, it's not this file specific, it's simply stored in your system settings for your login. Well, let's find that. And the system now found everything that has the term support with it, or the character support with it. And if I open up my browser, start to take a look, none of these parts do I see the character SUP. So it is obviously, as I right click and let's close this out. And if I were to open up this particular part here, let's just open one of them. And I'll see when I get into, well, I didn't have to open it. I could have just clicked on the iProperty, and I would see that under the summary, here we have supports. It's in the comments area. So searching for parts, searching for data within the part. So how to find data quickly. Along the same theme of being able to find data quickly, if we have more structure, more organization to our browser, that'll just visually allow us to be able to find things quicker as well. So in the browser here, you see I have these items, folders. If I right-click in a blank area, I have an option called Create New Folder. I could build a new folder. And dumps a folder down at the bottom of the browser tree. I can specify any name I would like. I'll just Control Z out of that, because let's say for example I highlight all of these rod ends. If I were to right click, I now have an Add to New Folder option. and when I click Add to New Folder, all of those parts are dumped into the folder which I now named Rod Ends. And if I open that folder, I see those parts are located in there. All right, so building some structure, specific types of components. Maybe these are parts that you're just doing some design variations or alternate designs on, and you want to keep them in a separate location so that you could, if I have an alternate design A, design B, and in subassemblies is not a convenient way for managing the data, I could right-click over this entire folder, and let's say that it was alternate design A. I could right-click and control the visibility of it, turn it all off in this case. It was some little parts right over there. We'll zoom up around that. Turn the visibility back on. So it was a little rod end right here that we see. But picking on that folder highlights all of them on the screen. So folders can be used for a variety of things, just for organizing, as you saw earlier, dumping all your assemblies into, or dumping your fasteners into, or as I said, alternate design options. If I right-click and I say, by the way, I can put a folder in a folder. I could have nested folders, but in this case, I'm not going to get into that particular step. If I delete this folder, it doesn't delete the parts. It leaves the parts where they were at and simply removes the folder, and now they're back at the same level within the browser tree, at the top level of the browser tree. I could move parts around. For example, I see I have two subassemblies here which I missed putting into my folders. So if I were to pick on them, drag them, put them into that subassembly, folder 02 subassemblies, they're now contained within this folder. But again, things are I'm starting to get a little more organization. I know how to find and search for things better. I'm starting to see how I can organize my data better. But let's take this another step further, and let's talk about our first productivity tool now. And let's put that to use. And that one's going to be AlphaSort. The AlphaSort tool is going to simply allow us to organize in alphabetical order the browser tree based on folders, parts, and assemblies. So knowing how the folders or how the AlphaSort works, I intentionally put 01 as the first characters because I always want my fasteners, assemblies, and weldments to be up at the top. Based on a meeting maybe that I'm going to be having with management or with a customer, a specific set of data is going to be in this folder. I want it to be at the top so I don't have to fish for it when I'm in front of the customer. If I take and I open these folders up, again, the data sorted at the top level and inside of the folder. So if you look at this data, you'll see that these are actually alphabetized as well. All right. Our next command, productivity tool that we want to get into, we talked briefly about it, is our renaming the browser nodes. Before I do that, though, I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to rename this browser node, and I'm going to do it in a way that, oops, you're not supposed to do it, but we will find, I've seen it in assemblies that I've opened up at previous jobs where users were renaming parts just by slow picking on the node and giving it a new name, whatever they wanted it to be, not knowing better. The problem that creates is I don't know what that part is, so I do have a way. If I were to look at my properties here, I can see that, okay, yes, that is the half-inch bushing. What I want to do, and here's the other half-inch bushing, so what I want to do is I wanted to replace this bushing, since I know it's the bushing. I want to replace that with another component. And let's just use our standard replace here in this particular case. And I got the quarter-inch bushing we're going to replace it with. And what happens is it doesn't fix the name. It stays as incorrect information. If I look at the properties there, I see indeed it is the 1/4 inch ID. Well, easy way to fix it, I could just slow click on it and clear it out, and it returns to the appropriate name. But what if you have 7 or 8 of them, and obviously blah blah stands out, that obviously that's some illogical name that I need to fix that. Did that intentionally for today's presentation. There could be some very logical names that are used here, and you're not going to be able to fish for them and figure out which ones they are. So with our next command, renaming browser nodes, what that will do is that allows me to display in the browser and have the file name appear if I would like. Or if I have my iProperty defined and have part numbers showing up in the iProperties, I could have a part number appear in place of the default name. Here I'm going to say apply and let's show me the file name, and I see now this part was fixed. If there were 20 or 30 of these parts that had that incorrect method of renaming in this browser, they all just are fixed all at one time. So no more having to fish for those types of problems. All right. If I want to get back to default, and you see that I have my assemblies, my parts. If I go back to default, we'll apply that. We're, in this case, we're just looking at the default name of that particular property. Underneath each of these, I'm in my assembly tab, or the assembly panel of my browser. If I click on the plus and expand that part, I see the constraints. If I go to my modeling tab or browser, and I now see the model information for that particular part. But this fillet, that fillet, I'm not sure which one I want to change. I could right-click here and say edit that feature, as we all know, and okay, that's the 1/8 inch fillet. Got the wrong one. So let's return out of that, and let's go to our next set of feature, our next feature, and this is something that's been in Inventor for a long time. It's but I thought it's important to show simply because we're talking about how to make the browser work more for you. So if I go to my Tools menu and I want to expand the information that's being displayed in the constraints and in the features, if I go to my Application Options, my Assembly tab, I'm going to check this item right here, Display Component Names after Relationship Names. Let's apply that. And now I can see, okay, after mate 189, that's a DC motor and the lower chassis. Perfect. All right. If I go to my part and check Display Extended Information after Feature Node Name, and I'll just say okay to that. What that just did now is when I go to the modeling panel for this same part that's opened up, now I could see that's an extrusion, it's a join, it's that many inches. There's the fillet, there's the one I wanted to get, that 1/16 inch fillet. So takes up a little bit more space. Sometimes you might need to leave your browser a little bit wider. Not too bad though. It just really can offer that information more, at a quick look, as opposed to having to search, fish, and try to find the information that difficult way. So to recap, in this first portion of our presentation, we talked about organizing the data in the browser, using your sort tools, using sort and rename and finding and the different find ways, and how to display this extended data. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Let's start talking about the next group of commands here. Next set commands, we're going to cover create derived substitutes, updating substitutes, save and replace, and degrees of freedom. Just a brief explanation about each of them, and then we'll move into a presentation for them as well. Create Derive Substitutes, it's a streamlined Derive Component workflow for all top-level assemblies within your existing assembly, and it creates a level of detail within each subassembly. So anybody who creates lots of levels of details will appreciate this command tremendously. Updating those level of details, if I have 12 or 13 level of details because I have 12 or 13 subassemblies within the main assembly, all those level of details will update automatically by using this one update substitute command. Save and replace. Have you ever opened up a part in an assembly and did a save as because you wanted to do a variation of that part's design, and then you go back to your main assembly and you use the Inventor replace or replace all command? This command does save and replace all in one. That's one of my favorites, actually. And this is I like this command here, especially when I'm teaching the software and I'm teaching somebody how to use all about assembly constraints for the very first time. If you can imagine back when you were first learning the software, if you could see an animation for the degrees of freedom, this command it does just that. It will tell us, it will display a dialog box and show us how many degrees of rotational and translational freedom there are for each of the components, and it allows to apply animation so I can actually see the part spin, move, translate on the screen. So it's a very, very nice little tool that Autodesk has provided us. Let's go back and let's talk about some of those now. All right. So we've got some organization to our browser. Now let's start to, here, let's just collapse everything here for the moment. And I'm going to work from within these two subassemblies, or two folders. So the next command we're going to use is going to be create derived substitutes. Dialog driven, displays all top level assemblies in this column here, and that's why I open up these two folders here, because what you see here and here is what you see over here. So all matching. Creates a substituted part, essentially gives it a name. I can control and define some information. I could type in anything I would like actually for the name. I could add a prefix or suffix, or I can accept the default in this particular case. A level of detail will be created inside of each of these subassemblies and at the main assembly here. Now I can control where this part's going to go using this column here. I can have it go to the source, so wherever this assembly is at, this part will go, or I can have it go to wherever the workspace is defined within my my project file or a user-defined path. Now I can also select on a couple of them, because the weldments and this bearing is a purchase part. I'm going to remove those from the list. I don't need those to be substituted. No need for it. Simply apply, and yep, what did I cancel that out? My little error there. We'll remove those, and let's simply say go for it. It tells me that there's 6 substitutes. And watch this. I'll be asked to save data periodically throughout this command. It'll take about a minute, but watch the browser here as the substitute level of details are being created. I'll let you watch instead of listening to my voice. And we just got a couple more to go now. Now, for those of you that do work with substitute levels of detail, I'm sure you have a great appreciation for the amount of work that's being done right now at this point. So the number of commands that are and operations that are being performed in the background just from that one dialog interface was a lot of work. Now, in each of these, if I open this substitute up, I have representations, and let's expand our browser a little bit. I see I have the master LOD still there, but another level of detail was created based on the command that I selected. If I go to my representations at the top level, I have the same thing. I have level of detail 1, which is active. If I were to double click on master, yes, let's save this first. So I just did a lot of work, so let's save that before, and then we'll go to our master here. All right, there we go. What that did now is that brought our assembly back. So I have, in this case, my main assembly where I do all my design work. Maybe I have a level of detail where I have a shrink wrap version of that part for whatever purpose in the manufacturing or design world that each of you live in. So each of these has that same level of detail.
We did that last night.
All right. So what we're going to do now is let's go in and let's make a couple changes, and we'll talk about a couple of the other tools here. So I'm going to open up this assembly here, and we'll talk more about, we'll kind of start combining a few more of these tools together. So I'm going to focus my design and open up this tool here. And what we want to do is we want to make some design changes to this part. I want to have an alternate design to it. I don't want to lose this part here. I want to keep this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into our next command, which is save and replace. With save and replace, I can pick the part first like I did, or I can pick it second. Asks for a new part name. The command adds the word copy at the end. I can accept that or type something new if I would like. I'm going to keep copy in this particular case. But let's see. Now that part is, where is that trowel at? There it is. We see in the browser, notice how immediately it was swapped out. So I didn't have to do a save as and then do a manual replace. Saving and replacing was all done in one command, save copy as. So if I were to make a change to this part, I want to add 2-inch fillet to this. We'll zoom into this area here. And we'll accept that. I have this change made. If I go back to, let's save that. If I go back to my main assembly, I see the one part. These are different sub-assemblies. So you see how one updated. This is left-hand version, a right-hand version. But if I go back to my level of detail, that still has the previous shrink wrap version, or however you want to, whatever you want to call this representation for your level of detail. All right. Now there's time and place where you still might need to use the Inventor, the regular Inventor replace command, because I have a separate subassembly. But here I'm simply going to start typing. I want to find trowel. There's the copy that I would like. That is the one I want based on my preview. And we've got that all set. So again, back to let's collapse my, get back into our levels of detail. I see, in fact, I have the original shrink wrap, and I have the new design that I'm able to work on as well. So save and replace. Next command. Let's work in the smaller subassembly here for now. Next one is one that I like to use a lot. This was an awesome one I like, but let's talk about degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom displays a little dialog with degrees of how many degrees of freedom that are translational and how many degrees of freedom for rotational. If I pick on a part, pick on your animate first, and pick on a part, shows you visually how that part is free to move still. If I were to pick, let's see if I were to pick, there we go, another one there. Nice command, isn't it? You know, this really helps new users to the software to understand constraints and freedom and so on. Our next command, we'll just talk about that. We're going to get into actually that brings us to the next part of our PowerPoint and the last part of our discussion here. And last group of commands I want to cover in the productivity tools are add part, add assembly. Now these are more simple type interfaces. Add part is a streamlined version of the create component command. Add assembly, you guessed it, is a streamlined version of create assembly command. No questions asked except for the part name that you would like, and in terms of the part and the assembly. So we'll show those in just a moment. The next command, link levels of detail. This command provides the method to select a named level of detail representation from the active assembly and activates a level of detail representation within the named assembly within all top levels. When you have more than one representation of the same name in multiple subassemblies in that top level, this command will be a big time saver for you. So being able to relink levels of detail within assembly and for all top level subassemblies can be a cumbersome task. This command will do it all in a single command. We'll get into component derive, which is a streamlined version of the derive command, derive component command, and we'll get into placing components at the origin. And then the last couple that we'll get into is ground and root. Ground and root provides an option to ground the selection, move it to the top of the browser, and apply flush constraints to root the selection to the origin of the assembly. We'll show you what we mean by that. The last one that we'll talk about, Load Express. Load Express is a feature it's something that you can control, turn it on and off as well from your application options, the assembly tab. We'll show you where that's at as well. So let's get into. Oh, we're not saying thank you yet. Let's get back into our presentation here, and let's talk about, in this case, a Derive component. So if I wanted to create I want to create a Derive, select my component that I want to derive from. I'm going to work from this one here. And it's going to be our trowel spider. But I'm going to call it derived. So without having to go through all of the commands for a few commands, it's a nice streamlined version where, as you notice, we have this component derived, or this component derived from the copy. All right. And, oh, that's right, I had copy in there, so that's why copy is being used here. So new part, new here. So if I want to do some, let's say we'll add we'll make a couple changes to it, and then that'll drive us into our next command here. So we'll just add some chamfers along these edges here. And we'll bump them up to turn my numlock on, 0.4. There we go. And we'll reduce it a little bit. There we go. So we've made a simple change to the Derive part. Save it. So quick Derive part. Takes us into the next command, which is place that component origin. So if I pick on this part here, and I go to place at component origin, I'm asked what part I want to place. Just need to go and track it down. I know I called it trowel. Derived. So I want to put the derived part in there. And we now see that. You can actually see the shadow of it. If I were to turn the visibility of this one off, there's my derived part. So if I want to do it again, a design takeoff, show some alternate designs, some alterations to a part, nothing major, just minor changes. Thus, I want to have the main parameters or main features of this part still reflect the parent part. This allows using this type of command and placing that component origin to get parts to line up quickly and easily is a quick, handy way to do that. So.
Yeah, another place I've seen it used, Randy, is specifically with the what we would call skeletal modeling, where we've got a skeleton and we can bring those pieces in. The ground and root, and then the place of component origin are both. I've seen those used within there, but it's a great. We could do it before. That's true of a lot of these tools. We could do it before. Mm-hmm. It just took a few steps to get there. So this is a good way to do that. Exactly. Right. As we mentioned, with a lot of them, these are very streamlined workflows, is what they are. So. Yes, I could have placed this part exactly on top of the previous part without the place at component origin? Absolutely, but I'd have to go through flush and mate and various constraints and so on. So, last thing, moving on to the next command, ground and root. I'm going to say ground and root. What that command will do is it provides an option to ground the selection, move the selection to the top of the browser, and apply flush constraints to route the selection to the origin of the assembly. So it's going to ground this part up to the top of the browser, and it's going to start applying constraints to the origin of this assembly. I can ground it. I can turn one or two or all the features. If I turn all the features off, it's no use using the command, but I'm going to select and keep everything here, and this part will be grounded and moved to the top of the browser now. Oh, what happened? There we are. There it is. So it took that part. Why my PowerPoint came to the top, I'm not sure. Maybe I bumped a key, but Inventor's live, so it is flying still. So again, if you have a need where you need to refocus what your main part in an assembly is, and you want to bring it to the top and start applying some constraint information, if I pick and look here, now I see that, okay, having that extended data that I turned on earlier, I could see lower chassis. And here is my lower chassis. So ground and root. Last thing will be our load express.
with Load Express, save changes, sure. What it's going to do is it's going to, when you have large assemblies called up and you want to be able to free up some memory, Load Express allows you to reduce the footprint of what's in memory and be able to focus on a certain set of data. So you're freeing up memory, allowing it to be available for other operations. So Load Express. Reverse of that, you know you're in the Express mode because you see the icon here. Simply pick Load Full, and you want to be aware that if you're seeing something that you don't expect on your screen, or you're seeing some remnants of something that you thought shouldn't be there anymore, it could be because you have the Express mode, you're loaded in the Express mode, and you do in fact need to go back to that Load Full. So when you have the Express loaded, just be aware that you may need to toggle to the full load everything up into memory if you're seeing some things that don't appear exactly as you expect in a large assembly. But that covers everything that I prepared for today. Caleb, you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, I don't think so. It's definitely, I appreciate that, Randy. That's and those tools, like we said, those are, every single one of them is really just the idea of a streamlined workflow, taking something you probably do today and smoothing it out a little bit. So, Cassie, I don't know if any questions have come in, but I think we're ready for them.